Hello everyone, and welcome to Ranting Politics. Today we'll be starting Part 3, Section 28 in Donald Barr's Space Relations. With the end of the rainy season, the winds shifted, and the curious smell of Kosar's sea, something like human sweat, something like fermentation, troubled Craig less often. The prevailing winds were now from inland, smelling of corn and fodder grasses not very far mutated from their earth-parent varieties. And Craig was lulled at moments into the illusion that he was on his home planet. The castle had two walled gardens, one of earth flowers, and the other of plants native to Kosar. The earth garden was small and perfunctorily tended. Evidently, it was an unvalued inheritance from some nostalgic ancestor of Lady Morgan Sidney's, whose tastes ran to the English Victorian age. Craig decided that he approved of that ancestor's tastes. The Kosar garden, much larger and better maintained, was crowded with great, fleshy growths bearing leaves more black than green and drooping blossoms. Craig supposed them to be that, of a pearly gray. And there were others with leaves concentrically orange and purple, and still others behind plastic glass that were like faintly phosphorescent toadstools. Craig detested that garden. Dr. Khoory seemed to feel no such discomfort. He was often there, busy. Either he was dabbling in horticulture, or the garden was providing him with samples for his drugs. Very likely the punishment drugs, Craig thought. Craig was set to helping the gardeners, and, being recently from Terra, was allowed to devote himself to the earth garden. Of flowers he knew little, but one of the two freemen who served as the chief gardeners, an elderly Kosarian named McInnes, was garrulous and rather kindly, and Craig learned diligently. Often he slept at nights in the household slaves' quarters, a warren of small, ill-ventilated rooms low on the land side of the castle, but almost as often he was summoned to her ladyship's apartments. "You're wanted to tend her ladyship's little garden," McInnes would say. "I hope your trowel isn't rusty, boy." It was his unvarying formula. Or Duplain, the other senior gardener, a deserter from some colonial army and nominally McInnes's superior, would grunt simply, "You. They want you." The ladies' apartments overlooked the Bay of Tregast from high in the tower nearest the sea. To Craig, after the mines, they seemed filled with an astonishing radiance. He would wake in the morning, lying across the foot of the bed, and no matter what his devoirs had been, the sheer lucidity of the daylight and the white curtains and on the white rug and along the white satin of the coverlet put him at peace until the lady awoke. The bedchamber was white. Other rooms were in other colors, but all of them conveyed an intense impression of chastity. That was Section 28. We are on to Section 29. The lady. "Do you consider me cruel, Smitty?" Craig. "Oh, no, your ladyship." The lady. "You don't?" All right, and that was Section 29. We are on to Section 30. Medusa loves me, hardening my flesh. She salts my dying childhood with her fury. Her white teeth open for a last bonne bouche, my cowardice. Her smoky eyes are merry. I think she loves me. When she eats my pain, she lies back dreaming, on the dampened pillow, the tendons easy in the golden skin, the golden snakes quiescent like a halo. I love Medusa laughing in her bath, tinted with blood, my blood. I love the keen blade of her fury in its silky sheath. Not feral, but the alien thought of man, far from the natural temper, far from earth. What pain can teach, the crafty mind can learn. All right, and that was Section 30, on to Section 31. The lady. "So you don't think I'm cruel?" Craig. "Actually, I do, your ladyship. You remind me of a girl in my class in school, named Hildegard Skink. Only she had darker hair. She was very cruel, even in 9th grade. She was probably the cruelest girl in West Orange, New Jersey." The lady. "You're in remarkably good spirits today, little Smitty. I hope they last." Craig. I was really very fond of that Hildegard. In an immature way, of course. The lady. It's not much fun humbling you, Smitty. You weep and plead and fawn deliciously, but you're not sincere. Alright, end of section 31, on to 32. Craig made no friends among the other slaves. He was tainted. At first they simply fell silent if he came near while they were dosing themselves with whispered fantasies of revenge and escape. Then they were ostentatious about falling silent. Then they took to blurting out selected hints and threats. And when they discovered that he did not report them to her ladyship, they talked for his benefit in more and more violent terms, working out obscene scenarios for the lady's future. Craig made a policy of ignoring this and of course acquired a reputation for being haughty. There was one slave lad named Kurt, a lanky boy of about 12, with light eyes and skin the color of old amber. Craig noticed that a surprisingly large number of young slaves were dark-skinned and thought he would ask Dr. Khoory about it some day, who was much disturbed by the talk. "Don't mind them, Johnny. They're only envious," he said comfortingly to Craig, and was so patently envious himself that for an instant Craig was tempted to pull up his shirt and show the boy the lattice-work of wheels on his back. But he looked into the guileless young face and decided that the boy's pubescent folly was more decent than what the truth might leave in its place. Another time, Kurt asked Craig, "Can't you make them stop?" Craig explained that trying to make them stop would only egg them on. This seemed too complicated to the boy, and he was disappointed in Craig. One morning, a slave who waited on table in the great hall was muttering about poison and watching Craig, and had begun to describe just how he would violate the lady in her death throes, when the brown boy struck him in the mouth, crying out to Craig, "If you won't stop him, I will!" The waiter, a big though somewhat flabby man, lunged toward Kurt, who dodged away but tripped. The boy went down. The big slave aimed a kick at him. As he drew his foot back, Craig hooked his own left foot under it and threw his right arm around the man's throat. "Let him alone," Craig said. The man wrenched free and turned on Craig. "Want to fight?" asked Craig pleasantly, gesturing peremptorily to the boy to move away. Kurt obeyed. "You bet I do," breathed the man. "Outside, then," said Craig. They went to a dingy courtyard area half hidden between two storage sheds, accompanied by a dozen hopeful slaves, including the boy. The man had the reach on Craig, and very decidedly the weight, and Craig had to dance backward to keep out of his grasp. The laughter of the watching slaves was broken by Kurt's wail. "What's the matter, Johnny? Why don't you kill him?" The big man rushed. Craig ducked beneath the grappling arms and landed a solid blow in the man's stomach, following it with a sharp punch that took the man in the underside of the jaw. Craig's antagonist gasped for air, but caught Craig from above around the neck and chest, lifted him up, and slammed him on the ground. The big man tried to fall on Craig, but Craig rolled aside and scrambled to his feet. His nose was bleeding. The man came on more warily, and Craig decided to change tactics. He danced for a moment longer and then suddenly charged, low, with a bellow. The surprise threw the big man off his timing, and Craig landed 4 vicious cuts on his antagonist's face and thought he heard a tooth go. As the big man twisted back, raising his guard, Craig became aware that the chattering and hostile grumbling of the watching slaves had stopped abruptly. In the silence, Kurt's solitary cry of, "Good! Good! Kill him, Johnny!" sang out clearly. Craig disengaged and danced around. The boy was standing apart from the other watchers, and directly behind him was the lady. She was not, at the moment Craig saw her, looking at Craig but down at the oblivious Kurt, who still waved his clenched fists in delight and called, "Now you kill him!" She glanced up at Craig, and the look on her face was one of furious envy. Craig's heart sank for the lad. The big man had also seen the lady. He stood still, with his guard still up, only the boy did not see. "Go in and kill him, Johnny," he called to Craig. "Teach him to talk about her—" He trailed off, seeing everyone's eyes fixed above him, and turned. A look of hopelessness came over his face. His dark skin flushed. The lady asked quietly, "Teach him to talk about whom?" The boy answered in a breaking whisper, "No one, your ladyship." The lady looked at Craig and back at the boy. "If it was about me," she said, bending to look the boy in the eyes, "let them talk." She pinched the end of his nose gently and sauntered away, giving, Craig could have sworn, a slight extra swing to her elegant posteriors. End of section 32, on to 33. The lady. "I've decided that insincerity isn't your problem. Tenderness is your problem. You have this insolent tenderness. I hate you." Craig. "Has your ladyship no tenderness of your own? I remember that day after the mines flooded, with the half-drowned boy in Barracks G." The lady. "Oh, that was play. It was a sensation, like everything else. Damn you. I'll show you tenderness." End of 33, on to 34. Mr. McInnes? "Yes, boy." "What happened to her ladyship's father?" "We don't talk about it around her." "That's what I noticed," said Craig. "That's what's so interesting. Who killed him?" McInnes looked around. They were in the earth garden and could not possibly have been under observation. "A slave named Whedon killed him. Black Whedon, that was what they called him. He was a black man from the Antares colony. He shot Lord Henry right through the heart." Craig. "Shot? With a blaster?" McInnes. "Shot. With a bullet gun." Craig. "Even a bullet gun? Where did he get it?" McInnes looked around again. "They say he had a cache of them. Him and his friends." Craig. "There were others in it?" McInnes. "That's what they thought. They never found out who, though. Couldn't get a thing out of Whedon, even with the drugs. He was something of a man, was Black Whedon." Craig. "How did they know about the others, if they never caught them?" McInnes. "They did catch him, in a manner of speaking. Or at least they killed them. It was a very big thing, you see, and the High Council met. Came here and met, and they executed every slave who had had anything at all to do with Black Whedon. Well, not anything at all, because he worked in the PPC in the clinic, and he did several females a day, but anything else." Craig. "Didn't they use drugs on any of the others?" McInnes. "Several. They didn't get anything useful out of him. Whedon had kept things to himself pretty much. He never told anybody where he had the guns hidden. He said they would all know when the time came. And the same was when someone joined up with him. No one else knew." Craig. "So all they could get a man to tell was whether he himself had been in the plot." McInnes. "And, of course, after pouring in more and more drugs trying to get more facts, the slaves weren't any use to themselves or anybody else, whether they'd been in on it or not. So the obvious thing was not to waste the drugs, just execute 'em all. That's how the High Council saw it. Something of a man, Whedon was. The strongest swimmer I ever saw. And vigorous? Sometimes 10 females a day, and most of 'em took. Of course, that kind of thing can make a man go crazy, you know," he said, looking severely at Craig. "Maybe that's what made him go in for—" He looked around and dropped his voice. "Rebellion. Of course, they've had 1 or 2 rebellions since, but not here. Whedon was the only one here. Right through the heart. I'm not criticizing him either. Well, now, we've said quite enough, boy. In another minute, one of us might say too much. Get to work." All right, that was section 34, on to 35. "When I was on Earth, my lady, I loved to swim." She laughed. "As my soldiers would say, swim in this." After an interval, Craig tried again. "Does your ladyship swim?" The lady. "What is this about swimming?" Craig. "I've always heard, your ladyship, one can do things floating in the water that are impossible otherwise." The lady thought for a moment. "Uncomfortable otherwise, perhaps, But why impossible? Craig, impossible. Your ladyship will see. End of 35, on to 36. Her ladyship dozed on a large, smooth, convex rock that rested in the foam under the cliff of the headland. She lay on her back, naked to the sun and spray, her arms and legs flung wide. Sing of the princess, muse of Andromeda, naked in gold, spread-eagled, waiting for dragons, not for the popinjay Perseus, murmured Craig. She did not react. He slid carefully back into the water. He was a fair swimmer, certainly not a good one like Black Whedon, the strongest swimmer McInnes had ever seen, and now, moreover, he was tired even before he began his search. But he would have only a few minutes in any case, this first time. He backed to the edge of the submerged rock shelf, filled his lungs, stopped off, and pulled himself below the surface. End of section 36, on to 37. The head gardener Deplain said he was ill and stayed in his quarters. McInnes, shrugging apologetically, told Craig to help in the Khosar garden. Craig winced and obeyed. There was nothing definably disgusting about the Khosar flora, no rancid or fetid smells, but evidently Craig's phylogeny was strong in him, and his instincts rebelled. Many of the Khosarians, he noticed, betrayed discomfort, disguised with exclamations, in the Khosar garden. Their Tehran phylogeny was at work. Others, and even some immigrants like Deplain, did not seem to mind. Craig was working on some low-border foliage near one of the locked plastic-glass cases in which the repulsive toadstools, or whatever they were kept. His pruning shears clinked against something that lay hidden in the shrubbery. He put out a gloved hand, felt it, and pulled the leaves aside. It was a neat, almost new little phosphor torch. He let the leaves spring back to cover it and continued his pruning. The torch was lying hardly more than a meter away from the lock of one of the toadstool cases. Someone, then, had been doing something with that specimen, something forbidden, or why creep in at night? The someone, therefore, would be back for the torch but could not make an outcry when he did not find it. Craig looked around. No one was near. He picked up a trowel with his right hand and retrieved the torch with his left, wedged the torch into the drawstring waist of his trousers. It was clammy against his skin, and casually walked toward the garden gate. He nodded to McInnes, who was examining a blighted plant and did not question him, and went through the gate into the earth garden. No one was there. Craig buried the torch under a rose bush and returned to his work, touching as he did so the bulge in the waistband of his trousers where he had sewn the little knife. All right, end of 37, on to 38. Later that day, Dr. Khoory came into the Khosar garden with a black satchel. "I would like you to work somewhere else. Over there will do, for a few minutes," he said to Craig. He opened the satchel and took out a light face mask, a pair of heavy gloves, and a small magnetic key. Put on the mask and gloves, unlocked one of the big plastic glass specimen cases, and, somewhat gingerly, slid the door open, squatted and peered at the gray fungus, took a plastic glass box, a scalpel, and a forceps out of the satchel, delicately sliced some fleshy protuberances from the plant and dropped them into the box, closed and locked the specimen case, dropped the key in the satchel, shut and sealed the box, put the scalpel, forceps, mask, and gloves into a bag, sealed the bag, put everything in the satchel, stood up, and started for the gate. Craig. "Doctor?" The fat man hesitated and then turned affably to Craig. Craig. "Did you notice that someone had been tampering with that lock?" Dr. Khoory turned without a word and hurried back to the specimen case. When he faced Craig again, his expression was grim. "I think you were right. How did you come to notice?" Craig. "Someone had been trampling the borders there." He pointed to the spot where he had found the torch. "Doctor, may I ask you, what is that plant?" Dr. Khoory. "You may ask, but I shall not tell you. Or perhaps I shall. Curiosity is the hunger of reason, you know. That plant is of a species that belongs to no known genus. It is literally sui generis. It is usually called leper's tongue. It is, or used to be, found only on Khosar, but no other plant on Kosar or anywhere else is like it. Its genetic structure is very strange, almost non-chromosomal. It is a poison, a vesicant, an intoxicant, a euphoriant, a hallucinogen. It is the source of squeed. It is the source also of one of the new punishment drugs. It is the source of 3 aphrodisiac substances. It is grown as a kind of crop by 2 of the proprietors. Unfortunately, it is difficult and dangerous to grow. Her ladyship has asked the High Council to ban it, but has always been refused. I have been, so far as my poor powers allow, doing some research with it. Hence these specimens. Her ladyship would like me to find a blight or a destructive specific of some kind. I have had no success. The lecture is over for today. He started toward the gate. Craig, so you believe, Doctor, that this is an alien species transplanted to Kosar? Dr. Khoory, you take my meaning. But from where? It has been transplanted to a few other worlds from Kosar, but every plant of the species in the universe has been traced, generation by generation, back to this cape, here, where you and I are standing. Her ladyship's late father sold spores to other proprietors. As to the lock, the culprit will announce himself sooner or later. He will identify himself as God. End of section 38, on to 39. The lady. You look so ridiculous, gasping and spluttering like that. Craig. If your ladyship succeeds in drowning me, I won't be much further use. The lady. That's true. Women are at a disadvantage when it comes to necrophilia, but I was getting tired of you anyway. You cloy. You do have talent, though. What I might do is put out your eyes and let you replace Blind Will in the PPC. He's getting old. We'd see how long your tenderness lasts. Craig thought of the tan-skinned young slave he had seen and Black Whedon in the PPC, doing 10 women a day. PPC? The lady. Planned Parenthood Center. It's in the clinic over by the wall. Craig. I think I understand. Except, why put out Will's eyes, your ladyship? The lady. Oh, we didn't put out his eyes. He blew them out repairing a machine or something. We had lost the slave who was there before, and this seemed like a job a blind man could do. But it would help to be blind, I should think. Most of the slave women are homely. You close your eyes when you're kissing anything anyway. You're so romantic. Meanwhile, get up there on the rock. Craig obeyed. The lady. Lie back. Close your eyes. Craig obeyed. He heard the quick sob as her body left the water to join him. His bright lids were shadowed. He waited for her descent. She seemed to pause above him. He opened one eye. Her face was just above his. She was frowning down at him like a child trying to read a grown-up's book. Close your eyes, she snapped. He closed his eye. A few drops of cool water were falling from her mane onto his face. But one drop was warm. It fell on his upper lip. Unbelievingly, he stretched up the tip of his tongue and tasted it. It was salt, the salt of earth, not the bitumen of the Kosar Sea. He felt a swift, feathery kiss on each eyelid. Then, damn your eyes, as she was her usual self. All right, that's the end of section 39. I think I am going to call it for today. It has been a pleasure reading for you guys. I hope to start section 40, part 3, in the near future. We will see. This is Ranting Politics. Take care.